Hi, I'm Vena Jones-Cox, and this is the question and answer video that I promised to folks who had questions at the wholesale market update last week that I wasn't able to answer because I was in a time crunch trying to get out of Las Vegas. And I know the lighting, I actually was waiting until I could get in a place where we could have good lights and I could have my hair and makeup done. And then I realized that if I did that, this was just never going to get made. So I'm sitting in my dining room doing this at night under my dining room light. So hopefully you can get past that and the fact that there's a giant pig in my picture here too. Because I'm here to answer questions from folks who posted them during the webinar. Now, if you did not attend the webinar, some of the questions probably aren't going to make sense to you, but we are having a replay of the webinar on Monday, February the 6th, and you can get the link for that at regoddess.com. That's my website, regoddess.com. So you're going to see me looking back and forth because the questions are over here on my computer, and it's just like in wholesaling. Sometimes you just don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of done. So we're just going to get it done here. All right. Question number one. Have you heard of investors trying to wholesale other wholesale deals? I would think that this isn't legal because the second wholesaler isn't a principal on the original contract. And that's from Sharmetta. She's referring to part of the wholesaling webinar where I talked about what the biggest threats were to our industry and talked about some of the regulation stuff that's going on. And Sharmetta, I am not an attorney, and I don't pretend to understand what is going on in the heads of the various divisions of real estate and whatnot. But I would say that the attorney that I do use for these sorts of things has the same problem with co-wholesaling that you do, which is that it's sort of when you have one wholesaler who has a property under contract and a different wholesaler who's got a buyer and is getting paid to bring that buyer to the table, that second wholesaler almost definitely needs a real estate license because they are not selling something that they are the principal in. They are effectively just splitting the money for bringing a buyer to the table, and they don't have a license to represent buyers, and they don't have anything of their own to sell. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. Jason says, what other types of marketing to sellers are you finding most effective besides direct mail? I can tell you, Jason, the only other kind of marketing that I really push in my own business is I have signs on my car. And those are very good at digging up people who kind of can't be found in any of the regular ways that we talked about on the webinar. So that's my second most effective way of marketing. And they're cheap. The ones that stick on the side of your car are like $40 a pair. The ones that are lettering in your window are probably a couple of $100, including getting the lettering and then getting it professionally installed. Next question from Stephanie. What are the best ways to learn about real estate laws, particularly one's own state, that could potentially affect wholesaling activities? And the answer to that, Stephanie, as always, is join your local real estate association and actually attend the meetings. What do you mean by non-wholesaling pricing on distressed houses? That is from Michael. I had mentioned during the webinar, which again, you can watch the replay by registering for it at regoddess.com. It's right at the top of the page. I had mentioned that it had become extremely difficult to get wholesale pricing on properties that were listed in the multiple listing service because for so many people, that's the only way they know how to find deals. And there are so many fewer deals. I actually have some graphs and charts in the webinar showing what has happened to inventory and why, and whether that's likely to continue this year. And what I was saying was when your typical buyer, so your retailer, your landlord, is in the MLS bidding up properties because they can't find them any other way, and this is the only way they know how to do it, you really can't get them at wholesale prices. So that was what I was referring to when I said you can't get wholesale pricing on distressed properties. G. Drummond says, I've been driving for dollars and found properties I would like to take a look at. Should I call the owner or contact them by mail? Well, I hope what you were finding, G, was not properties that you wanted to take a look at, but properties that looked like the owner didn't want them anymore. Because if you're out driving for dollars trying to find houses you'd like to own or like to wholesale, you're going about it backwards. You should be looking for houses that it's very clear that the owner either can't afford them anymore, doesn't want them anymore. The condition is just such that you can tell that it's costing the owner money instead of making them money. So assuming that that's in fact what you meant, if you can find a phone number, go ahead and call and just say, hey, I was in the neighborhood. I noticed you had this house at 123 Easy Street. I was wondering if you'd like to sell. But be prepared to back that up with a letter or postcard, because it's actually semi-hard to find people's phone numbers anymore now that all anybody ever has is a cell phone. And number two, when it used to be real easy to do that, and I would just go into the white pages and find owners, a lot of them never return my calls because the reason their house looks like it does is that they're in some kind of financial trouble and they assume you're a bill collector. So be prepared to follow up with a letter or postcard right away. Other questions. Here is one from Christine who says, will there be a turnaround with subprime market returning in the next 12 months with Donald Trump, and will Dodd-Frank be dismantled? What would you do immediately if you saw that tide coming? I don't know about the immediate return to the subprime market. We're not in that part of the 18-year real estate cycle where the banks get all crazy about loaning money. We're still a few years from that. I don't think repealing Dodd-Trump is going to bring back the subprime market. Actually, strictly speaking, the subprime market is still around. It's just called FHA loans now. So I expect no matter what happens, that lending will loosen up in the next few years, because that's just what happens in the real estate cycle. If Dodd-Frank is dismantled, at least in the sense of the heinous requirement that small owners who are selling, they're not really making loans, they're selling properties and carrying back financing, have to use licensed mortgage originators, were withdrawn, and if the requirement that at least small owners could not put a balloon in their financing were withdrawn, that would open up home ownership opportunities to hundreds of thousands of Americans. Because right now, folks aren't doing that. Their investors are not selling that way because they're being forced to spend $1,200 or $1,500 getting the deal packaged by a licensed mortgage originator. And some of these deals, I used to get $500 or $1,000 up front. It costs more to get the licensed mortgage originator than I get up front. And the balloon thing is a big problem. I mean, a lot of investors will look at that and say, in order for anyone to afford this payment, I have to amortize it over 30 years, but I'm not a bank and I'm 40. I'm not sure if I'm going to be around in 30 years, so they don't want to carry 30 years financing. So a lot of them are doing lease options instead of land contracts or mortgages, which honestly are a lot less advantageous to the buyer in a lot of different ways. So if those two things were pulled out of the law, I think you'd see a boom in lower end housing, particularly fixer-upper type properties that banks don't want to make loans on. I think it would be a good thing. Let's see. I don't have a question. This one's from Sharmetta as well. She says, I don't have a question. I'm just making a comment to affirm what you're saying. I just wholesaled a deal 3 weeks ago. I advertised it on December 30th. I found a buyer and locked up the deal on the same day we closed on January 10th. It was so quick. You're so correct with what you're saying. And again, that was when I was talking about how quick the market is moving. And again, you can see it Monday. Go to arigatis.com and just click the link to sign up for the replay. This one is from Terry. He or she, I guess, says, from a legal perspective, is there a difference between using an option to buy versus a purchase agreement? The answer is yes, they are different contracts. One of them says I have the right to buy but not the requirement to buy. That's the option to buy. The other one says I have the requirement to buy if certain conditions are or are not met. Okay, so most purchase agreements have contingencies that say I will not buy if I can't get my financing, or I can't, it fails inspection or something like that. The contingencies in purchase contracts often make them, as a practical matter, roughly the same as an option to buy, in that you don't have to buy the property if the contingencies aren't met. However, they are different legal contracts. I'm often asked why I don't use options to buy very much, and the answer is very simply that sellers understand purchase agreements. And the reason I know that they understand purchase agreements is because they bought a house, which means they probably signed one at some point. That's how they got to be sellers. They don't understand options to buy, and confusion means no. And from a practical perspective on small residential real estate, I don't find that it makes that much difference. Now, if I were trying to wrap up a strip mall for a year while I figured out if I could get it rezoned or something, I would probably use an option to buy and not a purchase agreement. Let's see. This one is from Dan. He says, I was at your academy a year ago and it was awesome. Would I learn anything drastically new if I attended this one? Well, Dan, let me tell you something. My experience is when I attend the same class over and over again, with much time having passed in between, I always learn new things, because it may not be that the class is that much different. It's more that I'm in a different place. Now, this particular upcoming class, the one in Orlando and also the one in Philadelphia, are pretty different from the one last year that I did, because I'm spending more time on the marketing, because that's the big thing right now, is you've got to be marketing or you're not getting wholesale deals. And I'm going to be spending more time on how to legally raise money to close deals, since that is a big concern that folks have right now, with the ability to be able to close, to at least to say you're going to close quickly and then actually be able to do it. So it will probably be different because you are different, and it will also be different because the academy itself is different. This one is from SRI 19. I see little no bandit signs in my area, although I have in the past. Should that give me pause about fines and penalties? If what you're asking me is, are there no bandit signs in your area because the city is big about fining people who put it up, the answer is I don't know. You have to go put up some bandit signs and find out. Bandit signs are not really legal in the way that they are often used. In other words, putting them on telephone poles, putting them in highway right-of-ways, any place in the United States. There's nowhere where bandit signs are like A-okay. There's ordinances against them every place. There are places that are a lot more aggressive about either fining folks, or what might be happening in your case is that they're aggressive about removing them. There are places that do that more than others. So that would be a question for your local community, both the investor community and the city itself, I suppose. I don't use bandit signs because I know they work. I know I've got a lot of local competitors who use a lot of them. It seems like there's a bandit sign on every telephone pole around here, and I am not exaggerating when I say that. And they tell me that they get all sorts of phone calls about them. They are sort of visual litter, and they do make the neighbors mad, and I find them harder to sort of manage, to kind of, get them out there, keep them up, all that sort of stuff, than direct mail anyway. But you just have to be aware that if you're using them, you're making some people in the community mad, and you are also putting yourself in the way of potential fines, tickets, etc. Let's see, this question is same person, SRI 19, says, I think you said you don't sell to new investors. Why is that if the deal is a good one? I see your point of view there. If it's a good deal, why am I keeping it away from new investors? And the answer to that is that a deal that is a really good deal to somebody who's been around the block a few times, done rehabs, has a team, has access to money, knows what to do and knows what to leave alone, is not necessarily going to be a good deal to someone who's going to be going on Angie's List looking for roofers, okay? Because the folks that know how to do this already know their own numbers, and they're not using mine, they're not guessing. I've sold in the distant past to several new investors who, for one reason or another, swore up and down that they could handle the rehab and then messed up the rehab. You know, I remember one gal who let her contractor charge 2 or 3 times as much for drywall as he had agreed to, and his reason was his drywall guy quit, and he, the contractor, was no good at it, so it took him longer, so he had to charge more. That's right, I'm charging more because I'm no good at it. I guess like a lot of real estate gurus. And I had another situation where these two guys basically re-drywalled the whole inside of a house built in 1900 because it had some cracks in the plaster, which anyone who lives in a house built in around 1900, if there aren't cracks in the plaster, you're suspicious. They went so far over budget on that they couldn't put central air in, and then their property didn't sell. And somehow that was my fault because I hadn't sold to them at a price where they could do something stupid and also do the thing that I told them to do. So bottom line is, a good deal to a more advanced investor may not be a good deal to a brand new investor, but there's a much more kind of direct business reason that I sell 100% to people who have experience in the field in which the property is going to fit. So if I'm selling a rental property, I'm selling it to a landlord. If I'm selling a rehab property, I'm selling it to someone who's rehabbed before. And that is that those folks make the fastest decisions, have best access to money, and are most likely to buy over and over and over again. You know, typically when I get to the end of my year and I've wholesaled 40, 50 properties, it's only been to 5 or 7 or 10 people. It's the same people over and over and over buying. And you've heard the thing about business that it's so much easier to keep a good customer than it is to go find a new one. The new investors, they might do one a year. They might do one and then never do another one. They might do one and mess it up and never do another one. So, not being mean to new investors, I'm trying to teach new investors how to be advanced investors, but it's just a business decision we made years ago and have sort of stuck to. Question about, could you explain the mid-market correction again? I did not understand what you were saying. Okay, that is from A. Procos. Okay, so I did a whole section during the webinar on a possible what's called a mid-cycle slowdown this year, where property values drop slightly for about 18 months, inventory goes up and so on. It had a lot of charts and graphs with it, so I'm going to ask you to just go back and watch the replay on Monday night at 8 o'clock, because that's, I probably spent 10 minutes on just that one section. And it's an important thing to know so that if it actually comes, you don't get scared of it, because it's not another real estate crash. It's actually potentially a good thing for buyers, which is us as wholesalers, right? So Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time, go to arigatas.com and sign up for that. And the final question is, when is the next seminar? I assume that refers to my next wholesaling seminar. I actually have 2 scheduled this spring, which is a little bit unusual, but Diversified Investors Group in Philadelphia pretty much insisted that if I was coming to Philly, I needed to do a boot camp there, and they've got the power, man. They are like the 800-pound gorilla of real estate investment groups in that part of the country. So Doing one March the 23rd through 26th in Orlando, and a second one in Philadelphia in May. And we are in the pre-registration period for that, and you can get more information on that 4-day event, which actually walks you through the process of wholesaling deals at arigatis.com. So that is it for the questions, and thanks for all you folks who were patient enough to wait for the answers to those. Appreciate you, and I hope to see you on Monday night on the webinar.